Yeah, I'm just going to get a quick, you know, sound right there and look at the shadows here. See if I want to have to rearrange some of the wires. I'm inside this. I have the front side of the tent actually inside in the cathedral part of the home. Normally where my drums are normally at, yeah. But anyway, so I thought I'd get a real quick look here at the lighting. I'll probably say something here in a little bit. I might just go ahead and just like start, but I don't know yet. I guess I'll know in a few seconds here. But anyway, yeah. I want to say something about yeah, it seemed to be the memory minus the fact of being the important side about a 25 to a 35 year period, and it's kind of like a little bit about television and music video and YouTube, being involved in certain parts about world news and national news. Kind of like a remembering, kind of reactivating a memory. And it seems to be somewhere in between 1994, 95, and 96. This being the year 2025, and I was kind of thinking about certain locations I was taken to during a 6 to 9 month period. It seemed to be the most intense part about an air raid while I was asleep. And how many times, I'm not for sure, but it was like different locations, like all around various places around the world. And it's kind of like thinking about one thing because it's kind of like the Bryan Adams thought I died and went to heaven, thought I died and gone to heaven, okay? It's the I'm not sure if the particular part about the whales, but it's the black and blue thing somewhere in my mind, not limited to the Bryan Adams videos, like thought I died and gone to heaven. And the hologram is kind of like where the whales are showing. It's kind of like I'm not real sure, if, but it's about the mind's eye part about it, and certain factors of the actual part about the whales, and it seemed to be like the lighting that gives the impression of a hologram. How true it is if it's actually a hologram or just lighting. I'm not sure if I could distinguish the difference or a type of lighting that would be considered more of hologram as compared to a cameo silhouette based upon a method that would present maybe like what a silk screen would mean if transparency was only the the amount of threads or spacing that would give the impression of some transparency, the concentration of what would might be the idea of maybe a mist that would be generated normally like in lighting with like lasers. Fog is normally the issue, but certain types of mist or water and instead of like the fog itself presents the more of the transparent side. And I'm not sure if that would be actually considered a hologram. I'm not sure if a hologram has the need for other requirements to make it. I'm not real sure about that, but it seemed to be something about the memory side about that one particular part about it. And I was taking different locations, like on gurneys, dollies, and yeah, it really carried about it. Yeah, certain places about um, the mind's eye, and there seemed to be the part about that one particular deal. And it's kind of like it kind of reminds me a little bit about a certain phrase by Carrie Joe about the bridge, and a location that was actually before 1993, 94, probably around probably 1988 to 99 on 288. There was like a bunch of um, lighting on the field, yeah, like holograms, transparent. I was actually going out in the field looking for silk screens and any kind of equipment that would present that, and I actually went out there. It's like walking out the field, going like, wow. But anyway, yeah. So like that kind of like reminded me about something about the bridge and something Carrie Job had said in the different video. It kind of like had some kind of connectivity about the bridge and Bryan Adams that way. Um, about the hologram being the issue at that particular location of certain information that I'd actually discussed um, to someone else. Yeah, but anyway, it's just kind of like something that reminded me about that. But and it seemed to be kind of like the Sammy Hagar and the Van Halen thing about the OU812 and the Black and Blue song, and the Chris Tomlin Holy Forever about the mind's eye, and in particular about the Bryan Adams. But I thought I'd include that because uh, the whale more so than the dolphins is kind of like the dolphins is I'm not real clear on memory about that, but it seemed to be more the whales. And I don't know if it's the humor about lobbying strategy for a more informative presentation, beyond expectations, surpassing the expectations of the Prince of Wales. I mean, it seemed to be so almost like hors d'oeuvres and caviar that way, making it be on the front lines of the beachfront like a black dot on a map. Yeah, beyond the primate spawning. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, so like, it seemed to be, a little bit of humor about that, about the lobbying strategy, beyond the expectations of the Prince of Wales. But anyway, it's like the Wales in the Bryan Adams video thought I died and gone to heaven. And I'm not sure if it's actually considered a hologram about that, but there's something about that in my mind, in the memory. And it's kind of like so many things. And one, I'd realized that memory had become an issue. And it should have been like an immediate memory. But I mean, it seemed to be that memory minus the fact of being like 35. And something about a Stargate program that it seemed to be. And I'm not sure, if the memory is like something other than me personally, or if that's like some idea of like participation that would only reflect. And I'm not sure what that is. And I'm not trying to be anything about them, self-destructive just because I have something to say about a memory about it. But in any case, yeah, so like but yeah, I thought I'd kind of include that because the thing about beyond the Bluebird bus, it kind of seemed to be, like the American Express and the Bluebird with the gold edge, okay? And it seemed to be the American Express about the Bluebird and, the Judy Garland song, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, Bluebirds Fly. And it seemed to be, really about the rainbow. And yeah, the baptism, and ultimately it seemed to be the Six Flags thing about, I want to mention something real quick about Austin Powers and the wheelbarrow and similarity of, LaSick laser corrective eye surgery, but there's like a white-haired, and I'm not sure if her eyes are green or blue, but it's something about the wheelbarrow being like 109, okay, and the S and S, like wheels, like plural, with two S's, it would be like, 1919 being like 38, applied to 109 be like 147, the affirmation of like Robert E. Rubin or a telepathic judge, or the thing about, live, live telepathic, yeah. So like anyway, so like the affirmation of 147, okay, and my thing is like really focusing more so when I think of the 147, it's like Robert E. Rubin, and the tribe of Reuben as far as like corporate law and the ecclesiastical sense of like the tribe of Reuben being of scribes, yet in the ecclesiastic more would be more on the clergy side of some of the older thoughts of like corporate clergy, and where the venue it seemed to be the real issue between clerical and clergy and corporate terminology, yeah, in the book of Ecclesiastes, yet executive, yet more so. I mean, if it's the idea of separation between church and state, and Ecclesiastes presenting the clergy in that way, or it's normally like kind of like corporate terminology that way, and when and where that's at. I mean, if it's going to be the issue, in that way, because the 12 tribes of Israel is like 144,000. Corporations 144, okay. And each, 12 tribes is like 12,000 each, totaling 144,000, okay. And Reuben is like the tribe of scribes, okay. My thing about like Light Scribe and Robert E. Reuben, the United States Secretary of Treasury, that way. And all that information, because it seemed to be, that once again, it's kind of like, there's really other books than The Secrets of the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country, but it has a lot of significance. And like the House of Cards, okay, it presents a lot of information, more so along the lines of like international monetary funding and hedge funds, and certain factors involving New York Stock Exchange and not the New York Stock Exchange, more so like investments other than the New York Stock Exchange, but and including a lot of that. Yeah. So like anyway, so like and Nimitz class and Turbulent Waters and Secrets of the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country, because it seems that the importing and exporting, in coordination with some thought of like a vice president network, a protected gross national product of international importing and exporting, as compared to like a vice president network, would be almost the issue between like whether or not, if commerce dictates what's on or offshore human capital, and at that point, if human capital, if investment terminology is going to dictate, whether or not if sand software is going to represent the acronym of securities and annuities, or, I mean, in my mind, it seemed to be the issue of like what programming is as compared to appreciation or depreciation. What participation is or is not in the circuit, or in my mind, somewhere between like litigation de facto and writs habeas corpus de facto being used, and some easement of intellectual duration. In my mind, somehow like the comptrolling, um, having like regulatory commission and annotation. And it's almost like, monitoring and domestic. Like, once again, I mentioned before that it seemed like Data Founder had presented like SAN software for quite some time. And, thinking about it after the fact, really, it became a little bit more noticeable when the structure of their website itself kind of like went beyond the thought of what now seemed to be like a monetary and domestic side of SAN software, not necessarily the gross national product. And it seemed to be that really, in, as far as real estate goes, that monetary and domestic side of like the aggregates presents more of a degree, non-degree of neighborhoods, yet the gross national product, like U.S. patented product protected by tariffs, as compared to maybe the thought of like a pending, patent pending as loss prevention, seemed to be more along the side of degree, non-degree as non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization in human capital, whether if human capital represents some idea of participation in a circuit or, you know, some idea like being itemized going through a circuit and becoming the thought of like human capital as itemization, on more along what would be in my mind represented more on the purple side of like carbon footprints, more along the lines of like the expenditure side of a gross national product. I mean, if there's a significant difference between hardware and software, or like wealth management or economic factors that would place the idea of like a placement in some dimensional clause in Washington D.C. in a direct circuit in the D.C. about all that. Um, yeah, so like it seemed to be a little bit about that, but I want to mention something about Bryan Adams in that one video because there were like so many different locations and really like once again it seemed to be like the screensavers and how true it is if Bill Gates involving like Microsoft, but it seemed to be that one particular. And I noticed it over a period of years that I had recognized seeing it that many times over about a 5 or 6 year period and grouped as some idea of sequencing different like screensavers. And I'd realized like after 3 or 4 times that there was like a sequence of like screensavers that were being presented by Microsoft. And I wasn't really in control of it, although I had data for like Wi-Fi, not really Wi-Fi, but a data plan that would include Wi-Fi other than the data that I'd actually purchased. But in any case, Microsoft had somehow like presented that, and it was almost like an interrupt, um, with Microsoft that wasn't in my mind a normal automated sequence. But anyway, when Europe's most wealthiest museum screensaver came up, and I'd realized I'd been taken there, and I don't remember much about it other than the hallway about the checkered floor, and ultimately it got to the point that when I was realizing something about additives, preservatives, and byproducts, I said that looks like a funeral home. And I was kind of like thinking about it being like a museum for like, additives, preservatives, and byproducts of like a museum for like dead people. Okay, I don't remember anything other than the hallway, it being like the checkerboard and the statues, the white statues. Um, but I'm kind of like I mentioned this before, I'm kind of wondering if it's something about Babylon being 71 in Pearland, or the thought of like the Hall of Souls, and it seemed to be almost like the Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze deal about that one particular um, that one particular hallway. I mean, if it's the thought of like the Hall of Souls, or the movie being titled like the Seventh Sign and then the Seventh Seal and all that like going on in and out of a prison in a circuit, um, and certain factors of the information in the movie. I mean, it's kind of like quite a bit was like going on for a 6 month period. It was like extremely intense, and more so the mind's eye, and kind of like wondering hey man, yeah, I mean for real, wondering if the mind's eye was like incoherence or completely preserved, yeah, for real, and carried about the military bureau to term it that way. But there's like certain different locations, kind of like that when the memory kind of like came back as that, it's kind of like a kind of post traumatic. I mean, it'd been 25 or 30 years when I really realized it for the first time was that screensaver. Okay, And then certain locations of before, during, and after some of the locations and on-site locations of music videos and motion picture overseas of both what would give the impression of like the American entertainment of way international as well as foreign, yet English in that way. And it seemed to be that regions involving like Region 0 and Region 1 and Region 2 of Europe um, presented, the idea in my mind of certain factors that have, it seemed to be that really something about, Agent 99, so get smart, get Maxwell smart, and the center point energy, smart meter being some idea that had been used as a Region 0 issue, and it like really presented, some issues of like complications as far as like anything like being on supplemental security, okay? But anyway, it's kind of like that went on, and it kind of gave the impression that getting rid of Centerpoint because it seemed to start to be given the impression that it's been being used as a Region 0 issue, and almost like an issue of like the birth certificate, and which seemed to be like the big deal of other information leading to like the Fort Stockton, Texas area about the Permian Basin and all the connectivity like graphite and the plateau and ascending from the plateau, Mount Olives, and the Transfiguration, Thessalonians, and the alphanumerics combined, the Transfiguration, like ascending from Mount Olives and then re-entering heaven, okay, apply to that Inuit copies on the backside of the US $1, okay? And I explain that, and here's things that, like, I'm on this phone now, okay? I have a new phone with a new number, but it's not the first time I have had, the area code 435. It's like Springdale, Utah area code, and my thing about really Zion National Park that way, and the Mormon Church, about the American religion, and the thing about all that information. But it seemed to be the one word in Thessalonians applied to the left side on the back side of the US $1 Inuit Coptus, and Inuit being 79, and then the C in the symbolic representation, then the PTIS, and that being like C3 and three simple methods of simple addition and computation of the symbolic representation being 58 and the PTIS being 64, being a total like a 204 minus the 192 of the word transfiguration equating to 12, okay, or Region 1 and 2 that way, or it goes on and on. But anyway, so like 12 is like the numerical value, like, and alphanumerically with the word spelled out, it's like 87, the truth, and miracle God and all that stuff. And the exact opposite is like 78 and hard God and Robert or escrow. And it seemed to be the issue of like the quarterback, predominantly the degreed quarterback of like the NFL, and ultimately the quarterback, and some idea of like the bicentennial quarter. This is the year 2025, okay, but from like 1776 to 1976, okay. Seemingly the alphanumerics of 200 being a 200-year celebration, or a plenipotentiary, and all that 200 stuff about transportation, and the alphanumerics, and one particular place in Fort Stockton, Texas, the James Null unit, and the Ector. And I want to make this real clear real quick, because it's only because of availability, and I think it's really the availability being made of economics because of that one location, the Ector sector, the sector guitar and Ector in Pecos County in the Fort Stockton, Texas area. And I think the availability has been a networking issue, and specifically the availability and the thing about sector guitar. And I'd mentioned and I'm actually doing the Effector, the two songs of Effector, New Jerusalem and anyway, I'm doing two songs, and New Jerusalem is one of them, and actually, in any case, you'll see they're both on the same deal, but I'm talking about that setting in the sector and Ector guitar, with that setting in the same clothes and the same lighting and everything. But in any case, the sector Hellraiser, and the thing with this is that really the Ibanez is the thing. But as far as availability, I'm thinking that Boeing Guitar Airline and Emirate Airline is the thing about the Fort Stockton, Texas area, and the Ector County, and the Line 6 V series. My thing about the Seventh Heaven that way of Line 6 and television programming, and the Seventh Heaven thing about the Statue of Liberty and the Seven Layers of Atmosphere. Man, it seems to be the transition from the 6-string electric guitar to the 7-string. It's almost like a conversion from analog to digital. The thought of like re-entering heaven, and that one word, and combined with the Inuit Coptus and the sector thing about um, the re-entering heaven as if there's like the need of like knowing, hey, there's like a difference, okay? But anyway, I was referring to the sector, Hellraiser because of the um, um, oh god. Anyway, it's like a battery powered effect, okay? Sustainiac, yeah. Anyway, it had that and it had the sound and the availability was like, as far as like options and choice at the specific time. Now it seemed to be, that exact reason. A vector county being sector and Ivan S series apply to like Ector and the pronunciation is sector and Ivan S series because I'm looking at the Ivan um, S series as the sixth string, but that will probably be the one including the sixth and seventh string when I get it. That will be the guitar, but I've got the sector um, the Red Rain not the Hellraiser I was going to get it, but anyway like I went ahead and got rid of that anyway. But I want to make that much clearer about it because of the my thing about Fort Stockton in the county, and it seemed to be that Boeing and guitar and Emirate is a deal about. I mean, like really like the plateau because like on one side is the thing about the identical twin rainbow. My thing about the thought of like Chevy Chase in the movie Best Defense, and the capabilities of satellite technology and surveillance and the super thing about the zoom and reconnaissance and surveillance and that particular capability of lasers. My thing about that capability is more on the rainbow side of that location of Chevy Chase and that movie Best Defense, and completely on the exact opposite the plateau and the Permian Basin being something of like a plain horizon in the way of like a platform or the plateau or for Purple Mountain's majesties above the fruited plain and the rainbow thing about that and all the colors about it, yeah. So like anyway, I was wanting to include that because there seemed to be that the Boeing being 52 or like or heart or pearl, um yeah, and certain factors ultimately gets to the VPN in 52 that way. And I wanted to say something about Annette Pinicello is like Pinocchio, okay? It's like the power factor of like, Annette Pinicello based upon pronunciation and alphanumeric linguistics is like the 8 is like really 44, Vic's formula 44. The 8 applied to each L being like the P in the proper English numerical composition, the PPI of the Mississippi, yet the PPO and the HMO based upon, the Iowa caucus and the Eurodollar defining me the halo side of the symbolic representation on the backside of the US $1 in between the C and the PTIS. That ultimately the three simplest most methods of computation equaling 58 and is the actual numbers and the alphanumeric value and the same letters as hot cafe coffee cup and McDonald's thing about both half cycles above the equator that way of the golden equator and the humor of ethnic background, the Freddie Prinze Chico and the man, Chico in the bank, that Chico and ultimately Kobe ID 19, the man being 28, the bank being 28, the money being the bank in 72 and Kobe ID 19 being 72 and all that stuff. Thing about ethnic background would be like the golden equator being something about the color code of McDonald's and both half cycles being above, and the humor about ethnic background and the thing I waited my whole life to be polite, and the thing about ethnic background and the color code of the Chico Six, almost like a conduct report of like a political science drum major, in that way and well balanced, and I know you mean well, yeah. So a little bit of humor about the color about that and ethnic background in that way. The Freddie Prinze Chico stick. Um, yeah, and a little bit about the conduct report. Yeah, like a political science drum major conduct report. But anyway, I wanted to include that. It's already going on like 24, fixing to be 24 minutes and like 33 seconds right there. Yeah, so like I want to mention that about Bryan Adams because likewise in addition with like Bryan Adams' name, and I kind of like been thinking about AOL and Orion performance monitoring and Orion and A Ryan, and now I'm thinking about like Bryan Adams' name being the B Ryan, and the A of like Adams being the A Ryan, and the atoms in the A, um, with Bryan being the A Ryan, and the B to the atoms being the band. And it's almost like the KU band of like the VSAT communications at the same time. Yet the A Ryan of Aryan, it seemed to be the Aryan Skynes event thing about Bryan Adams' name that way. Of, Pentagon Reserve Reverse Intelligence and Opposite and telepathic phase and certain factors like his name. It seemed to be about, the Orion and Aryan and pronunciation and the Aryan thing about going beyond, the thought of the norm. More so, it seemed to be the difference between like appreciation, depreciation beyond, real estate involving neighborhoods. And, the thing with this is that I kind of like, we really wish Washington, D.C. would distinguish the difference of Senate participation in congressional acts. And, if the yays and nays is really the thing about appreciation or depreciation of neighborhoods. And in my mind, how true it is if it's limited to, but it seemed to be more so on the monetary and domestic side. More so, it seemed to be the economic factor of like, a patent pending as a loss prevention as compared to, a protected U.S. patent thing that's the gross national product of, seemed to be the commercial venue of living quarters. And, the deal that's not really ever going to be an issue of depreciation, more so maybe only more so in real estate of neighborhoods than actual commercial venues, considering everything that's involved. And it seemed to be the thing about the Alpha Mercer 24 and the IAE and the GMAC promissory notes and the HOA, Homeowners Association, and the RF, a redundant frequency, and other factors. And it seemed to be that the simple Alpha Mercer 24 and the big O being a zero as an option based on match and identify. I mean, it would be the 240, which is the deal about commercial venue living quarters, the 240 volts of the international electrical electronic engineering as compared to the predominant issue of like normally of lighting of 177, which seems to be the big deal about alphanumerics of like a telepathic power, mental telepathy, or subliminal message minus the 26 thing. Ultimately get into the Holy Spirit, the Secret Service thing, and Jesus Christ, yeah. So like in any case, so like in that way, the lighting itself predominantly, I've seen and heard it both ways, of 177 and 277. And I mean, if the 277 volt of lighting, I'm not real sure why, other than maybe the thought of 100 Club and the color code of code blue, maybe a solid state issue, or just a simple fact of a quarter being 100, or telephone being 100, or the code blue thing being the 100, or the difference between 177 and 277 volt. And I think both of them are isolated specifically of lighting. I'm not real sure about that, but I know that much about lighting that it's both 177 and 277 that way. And if it's a thing about even Annette Panicello is really Pinocchio, yeah, because we here at Colonial Pen have changed our name to the Omish Artesian Calmness, adjusting the Pinocchio barcode, and GMC's raising the ball. Yeah, so like in any case, so like it gets into that, and it seems to be the pi squared factor of knowing that information of Pinocchio and Panicello based upon pronunciation, and the acro, the A and A, it's almost like the radius identifying itself of a pi r squared and applying it to the H being like 4 in Vic's Formula 44, or the DD on the driver's license, to the LL of Panicello, and 12 with 4 is like 16 twice, and the PP of like English proper grammatical composition, when the P is visible it's pronounced, when the P is visible it's silent, like in that fact about distinguish the difference of that integrated and practical application of principle to the county and the country that way, not limited to, but those are like the automatic probably the most used as that way. But anyway, it seemed to be that practical application applied a pi r squared and E equal MC squared, of like the square being applied to itself in pronunciation, not the degreed definition of intended use. But when alphanumerics and linguistics is involved. It's more so along the lines of pronunciation. And the square, everyone knows that a square with the pi square formula is automatically applying, adding itself to itself twice. But the square, knowing that that word means that in that formula, and actually accomplishing that in the word square is the fact of knowing that really it's like Lockheed Martin with the two open ends, and the infinite lines that way of two 90-degree right angles, um, and just knowing that pronunciation, the extra zero, the O, provides an analytical and symbolic perfection of like perfect 10-10 vision in the figure eight and infinity, like on the zoom lens, that way of like, accuracy based upon a known defined entities as compared to an analytical and symbolic, like the square, and imagine identify practical application, going beyond a degree definition, but a little bit of more so a pronunciation of like comprehension. That's just the fact about like alphanumerics and linguistics, and like Vantage Love 30 being a secret de facto. I mean, it's like I'm looking at it like my entire life and realizing that I didn't even think about, alphanumerics and linguistics, and realizing that much about, the pronunciation side about it. Man, I've been looking and practicing it, and actually been there and didn't remember something about that. Not taught about it. But certain thing about memory minus facto, it seemed to be the thing about memory, and I'm not real clear, as far as like a military burial deterrent. What that means is the memory, other than knowing that of eternal treasuries, that the fact about it would probably be a duration that long, and other factors involved like television and entertainment, that would be the thought of like rejuvenating some idea of memory, and then realizing that it happened like way more and didn't, and only because of that. I mean, it probably wouldn't remember a thing without television or entertainment being involved that way. So for a little while, I mean, all of a sudden overwhelming thing about post traumatic, but it's been that long, in that way. So in any case, it seemed to be, for a duration for a while, but it's like when I realized, and it's like more and more videos and locations, it's kind of like, God, I find it hard if something like that happen, But in any case, so like I don't want to dwell upon that, and just like move on with it. But I thought I'd mention that because it seemed to be something about the hologram, a little bit of combination of Highway 288 and like some visuals on Highway 288 and certain factors involving different types of helicopters, yeah, motion pictures and others, and there's like on Highway 288 there's like only motion picture type of like futuristic designs that really I hadn't seen anywhere else, and that was like on 288, in combination with certain other factors of what appeared to be the Comanche and Apache helicopters like hovering at the tree lines and the skyline issue about certain factors and certain lighting and effects that way that presented holograms in that area. Yeah, so it's almost like the Earth, Wind, and Fire thing about the song September, not limited to something that never was a cloudy day, and some visuals like similarly about that, yeah. Not limited to, and it's somewhere in my mind something about the incoherent thing about subconscious mind stage being 181, and Houston, Texas, we international, and selective service and electronic power and all that stuff. So like it seemed to be the thing about a memory that that it involved something like that, like an air raid while I was asleep, and about a 6-month to 9-month period happened, and quite a bit happening during that time at different locations involving like Geneva, Switzerland, a location on the west side of Houston, and the rectangle seemed to be the only thing about Lincoln Continental Hood representing like international financial management, international banking systems. But yeah, it seemed to be the rectangle locations was only the thought of like even the memory of a newborn child, of that kind of incoherence. It's kind of like anyone who probably could remember back, probably, maybe if it's lucky enough to be the same day that the footprint was like put on a birth certificate, a newborn child like not having even any concept of language other than a visual. That kind of incoherence where, is comparable, but not the same situation or the perception, but it's that real strong similarity of not necessarily comprehensible language, but only the vision. And that is the kind of incoherence, and not really blind. That kind of incoherence, the vagueness is like unreal. Yeah, really, really not funny in any kind of way. But in any case, I wanted to mention that because of that type of deal about vision. And it seemed to be like some of the earliest, the first thing I like remember, like I think my earliest memory as a child before any concept of like language was like what I think to be is almost the anesthesia, the what would be normally an oxygen mask. I think I think my first memory is like when I opened up my eyes, there was like three lights above me, almost like a dentist office with the glazed set the softer side of lighting and a mask that would be like an oxygen mask or anesthesia. I'm almost to the point thinking that mine was anesthesia. I think that's like one of my first memories. Right, it must have been like right after I was born. I'm not sure actually when, but it seemed to be the thought of just vision and not a concept of language or anything other than the visual. But anyway, I just want to include that real quick because it seemed to be the birth certificate is a big deal about something about Fort Stockton, Texas, that location and Emirates and Guitar and Boeing. Emirates being like 71, like Pearland, okay, and Boeing like Heart. The Heartbeat of America, yeah, Boeing's the 52 thing, and Pearl and VPN and the Alpha American 6 and all that stuff, and the Better Business Bureau and the bird bath baptism. Oh my God, there's the pi r squared and E equal MC squared, the bird bath being unidentified like bird bath baptism, like a UFO sighting annotation in constitutional law. Huh. Yeah, yeah, space exploration, yeah. So like any case, yeah, so like yeah, like the Six Flags thing. Oh, and I want to mention something real quick about the wheelbarrows once again, because the similarities of the coupon of like laser corrective eye surgery. I mean, the blonde haired, she's in the wheelbarrow in one of the movies. Actually, Charlie went back and looked for it. But anyway, she's like in the wheelbarrow for like, I mean, it seemed to be like only a few seconds. And I'm almost assuming it would have to be 15 seconds. I mean, why not? The face value thing about it. A picture is a picture. But wheelbarrow being like 109, yet SS being, the acronym of even the I missing on the backside applied to the SS and, the wheelbarrows being wheels and barrels. And SS being the alphanumeric of like 38, 19 and 19 combined with 109 is 147. And Robert E. Rubin, the United States Secretary of Treasury, automatically one of the 12 tribes of Israel, in biblical, based upon E. Reuben, of Robert E. Reuben's name being just one word, Reuben, the way it's spelled in King James Version Bible, tribe of scribes, like a United States Secretary of Treasury really is. Like a secretary being like a scribe. In any case, but that's the way it's spelled is Ruebin in the King James Version. It's either RE or RUE. REU, I think it may be RUE or REU, but anyway, it's one or the other, and it's one word, and it's spelled that way. That's Secretary of Treasury. Robert E. Reuben is like, 5 and 64. Reuben without the E is 64, and with it, it's like 69 in Texas and Jehovah. And biblical reference, Reuben being one of the 12 tribes of Israel, automatically it's like a Texas Jehovah thing in religion that way. And the Secretary of Treasury, Robert E. Reuben, and he's also he was on television, I mean, so much. My thing about going through the circuit and, looking at the secrets of the temple, how the Federal Reserve runs the country in combination with that information. And Robert E. Reuben, I mean, was like on television, I mean, so very much that I decided to follow something about him with the Wall Street Journal. Yeah, that way. And it was like reading up on him, how his involvement with like Citigroup, giving the impression, likewise, in addition, a Citigroup of like General Motors, and the thing that indirectly, automatically seemed to be the General Motors involving not really defined Citigroup's participation in any kind of way with de facto, there seemed to be a big deal about General Motors and a promissory notes and the thing of GMAC and promissory notes and really the thing about I'm assuming the note, whether the note is really the issue of de facto of General Motors, even Citigroup. But Robert E. Reuben's participation that way of the information of the Wall Street Journal identified Detroit as the thing of Citigroup, which is, obviously, General Motors, the same city, with Sarbanes and Oxley presenting, Sarbanes and Oxley financial instruments and SOX compliance. And the two cities like Chicago and Boston, automatically the two major cities of two of the 12 Federal Reserve Banks, um, or two of the 12 Federal Reserve Banks is like Chicago and Boston, and like a color code of like the Boston White Sox and um, the Chicago White Sox and the Boston Red Sox. And the thing about, yeah, yeah, the white blood cell and the red blood cell. I mean, for real, yeah. So like, in any case, so like I was thinking about that way because the financial instruments is almost like a little bit of humor about Brazoria and something about the Paleolithic Anglo-Saxon, um, or like a stationary engineer sitting on a toilet riding their Roman chariot in Sacramento, and a little bit of humor about that financial instrument that way. So like anyway, so like in any case, yeah, it seemed to be that ultimately that the Sarbanes and Oxley financial instruments of SOX compliance is almost like the baseball, that way of color code, and SOX compliance is it's almost like an Eagles the long run Eagles long run song. It's like the SOX compliance, the long run socks, yeah, a pair of socks, yeah. Why wouldn't it be the long run? It seemed to be like the only two of a pair of socks, like the Eagle song long run. It seemed to be the Sarbanes and Oxley financial instruments of SOX compliance being the Eagle song, the long run being about the socks, and just being two being the long run, being like a runner, jogger, sprinter, and Sarbanes and Oxley financial instruments SOX compliance, and the only two major cities of Chicago and Boston being the Chicago White Sox and the Boston Red Sox. And Sox compliance. And the Eagle song, The Long Run. Yeah, yeah, sure it is. So, like, in any case, so, like, I want to include that real quick because it's already going on like 41 minutes and like 52 seconds. So, I'm going to take a break right there and get back into it. Okay, there it is, yeah.